There's going to be easy games and hard games, a comparison video, right? And yeah, this is not necessarily which is better. I'm just making a comparison between the two differences. And yeah, like and subscribe, share the video all over. And yeah, so easy games, for example, they're gonna be easier to get into. They're gonna require less patience, right? It's gonna be easier to progress, easier to navigate throughout the world sometimes, right? And yeah, it's gonna be better overall for beginners, right? Harder games, they're more strategic. They can be more frustrating, but again, it requires more patience, and you're gonna die a lot more in them, right? And more loopholes, trial and error, and all that. And yeah, so I feel like for me, personally preference for to play more easier games. And sometimes like it's a relatively easier games, right? A Ratchet and Clank game, or a Mercenaries 2, or like a Just Cause, like a Prototype, or something like that. Sometimes I prefer to play easier games, like when I'm bored. When I'm bored, playing like a harder game is going to be more discouraging, right? But sometimes it can be more engaging. A harder game can engage you more, It can really immerse you in that challenge, and it's going to offer more challenge to you. A challenge to you, and yeah. But that's not to say that easier games can't have challenge, right? There are some Ratchet and Clank games, they're relatively easier for me, right? But there are some with some challenging time trials or challenge modes, and yeah. So, frustrating. So easier games are going to be less frustrating. And one of the biggest differences is that you're going to die a lot more in harder games. You ever play a Ghost Runner or a Returnal or some sort of roguelike or a Souls game, you're going to die a lot, tons of times. But dying is part of the learning process, because it's like a trial and error. You get better. So the more you die, you learn the pathways better, and the bosses, the attack patterns, all those things. Sometimes too, it's like a mission fail. You're going to fail missions more, but it's understanding that puzzle or that boss better. It's more of like a strategy, right? But yeah, easier games, you're not going to die as much, because you have more, again, you got more to work with sometimes, or there's going to be less puzzles, less loopholes. And like when I'm bored, sometimes, like for me, when I'm bored, I don't want to deal with any puzzle or any loophole or any annoying hard boss, right? I just want to get into the gameplay, knock over enemies, left, center, and right. Stranglehold, for example, 007 Bloodstone, Ratchet and Clank, with the various weapons I have, and yeah, or Arsenal, Mercenaries 2, the airstrikes, or vehicles in Just Cause, like various vehicles you can drive, and yeah, but you're gonna die a lot less. Prime example, Mercenaries 2, you're like you're like a human tank. You can take tons of damage before dying, compared to Elden Ring or some sort of Souls-like game or Ninja Gaiden, where your health is more limited. Like your health is more limited, and you have less stamina. You're gonna die a lot quicker. Right? It goes into how OP your character is. So overpowered your character is compared to the enemies. In easier games, you're gonna have relatively more. Again, you're gonna have more to work with, more weapons, right? In harder games, you're gonna have less to work with. You gotta think more strategically in how you're gonna get progress, right? Like in how you're going to progress, as opposed to in easier games, right? It's a lot easier to get through those harder, moments, or that boss or that area, and yeah, But yeah, really, just a loophole. A big one though, like, is a loophole, right? Crash Bandicoot, for the most part, you don't have a lot of attack options. Crash Bandicoot is about platforming. But the good thing about Crash Bandicoot is that, it really strategically, like you learn the platforms better and the pathways better and all that. And yeah. Progression. So progression, in sometimes it can be upgrades. This is going to be like a small point, but progressing is easier in easier games, right? Is easier in easier games. For example, Just Cause or Mercenaries is a lot easier to progress and upgrade things, right? As opposed to in harder games, it's gonna take you longer to progress. And yeah, for example, for me, Elden Ring, for example, or like a Souls-like game, I'm not really used to the Souls-like game. But collecting souls and runes, you gotta upgrade them. And I thought it was very stingy, and it was a very, a grindy way. Like, you're gonna have to grind more in those games, in those harder games, to get to those higher levels. Easier games, and not so much. You're gonna have an easier time getting to those, a smoother time getting to those higher levels, and yeah, or getting the better weapons, builds, etc. And yeah, easier games as well. So easier games. Sometimes like in easier games, you're gonna have easier pathways, right? Or less challenges as well. Another big thing too is patience. Patience is for example, Souls games or Crash Bandicoot games, Ghost Runner, Hyper Void, they require more patience because they have more barricades against you, more challenges. So more is working against you. So you have to be more patient in order to get past that challenge. Easier games, you can actually, it's a lot more beginner friendly and easier to get into, right? Because you have less of those challenges, right? Or loopholes or barricades against you. But definitely, like, one of the biggest, is patience. Just the patience. And the patience goes into, the fun, because sometimes you just want to play a game, have fun right away, right? For me, dying, in a game, dying over and over and over again is not fun. It is not fun. But it's a way to get you to learn the game better. But with dying over and over again, it's going to take up more time, like on the playthrough. And you're going to, sometimes though, it feels like you are wasting time, even though it's a way to get you better. But in easier games, you're going to get through faster pace, more faster pace, like you're constantly progressing faster. And yeah, it doesn't require as much patience to get through one area, right? And yeah, another thing between them is the navigation. So the navigating to find your points or objectives like in the world. Easier games, again, probably after this is not always the case, right? But navigating is a lot easier in terms of finding your objectives in easier games. And there's more assisting, so there's more markers to assist you, right? Whether it be like in the world or like on the mini map or the actual map itself. But yeah, harder games, you're gonna have less assistance, so you gotta naturally progress and you gotta naturally learn the game to find your way, right? Sometimes like a game like Elden Ring, for example. Elden Ring, you gotta naturally explore the world to find the game. Doesn't tell you where the next boss is, right? You're gonna naturally find it, right? Exploring the world. And yeah, but yeah, there's less assistance to navigating you. In easier games, there is more. Sometimes there is more assistance. And yeah, not to say relatively easier games, not to say that you won't have a hard time finding things, or where exploration is not encouraged. You can have that as well, right? Like in easier games, but harder games, right? Relatively, right? And yeah, sometimes in harder games, controls. That is another thing too. Easier games controls is gonna, it is a lot easier to learn the controls in the game. Very straight, a clear cut, straightforward. Sometimes not always the case in harder games. Metal Gear Rising, for example. However, Metal Gear Rising is more of like a medium. It's not hard, not easy, but Metal Gear Rising, learning the parry system in that game was not easy at all. Learning the parry system, no, it was not easy, right? Where you had to hold the left stick, what was it, R2 and square, right? But yeah, so learning certain things, right, or sometimes certain elements aren't as clear cut. In the stamina system in Souls games, I'm not used to Souls games, so the stamina system, basically, if you don't have stamina, you cannot attack as effectively, right? So yeah, for the most part, easier games doesn't have those limitations like that. Easier games, I'm not saying that they can't have harder controls, but you're not gonna have as many limitations in the controls as, let's say, in harder games, right? But just like with any game, any genre, once you learn the controls, the pacing, the features, the side features, the game gets easier over time, right? It gets very easier. It gets easy to learn the controls like of a game. But yeah,